So this is my Mega Man Maker level for VGD Game Design Assignment 2. Now this first section is focused on teaching the player movement. You can see here that the player learns that they cannot jump over a stack of more than 4 blocks. This next section is teaching them how to use falling blocks, or how they're used rather. And then this section shows them the use of checkpoints, as this part you can't actually get past it until you die and the falling blocks respawn. So then the player falls down here, and then this section is teaching them about enemies and how to fight them. Only ground enemies though. In this part of the section they actually they learn how to incorporate falling blocks into the use of fighting enemies, which can actually be used later when fighting the boss. It's kind of like a little cheat that I put in there. And the player jumps over here, grabs the health, and then they move into the next section, which is teaching them the use of jumping with hazards. So before now there was no actual danger when jumping. Now you're learning how to jump over gaps, and the player has to learn to do so very carefully and quickly in order to prevent the falling blocks. And ironically, this was actually the hardest part of the game to make, specifically because the falling blocks and the spikes don't tend to work together very well. And you can see there, if the player doesn't actually learn how to jump, then they can miss the life that's there. And then, yeah. And then this is the final test for jumping. The player has to use all the skills learned in jumping this far to get past it. And then they enter the next area, which focuses on fighting airborne enemies. So before now, it's been all land enemies, so you can just stand on the ground and shoot them. But now it's more focused on having to jump shoot, which is a difficult tactic to learn in Mega Man, but again, it comes in very handy when fighting the boss later on. And of course the player has to learn how to do so while dealing with hazards. As you can see earlier, if the player jumps too high, then they'll actually hit the spikes, which kind of increases the danger level. And then at this point, after the player has learned how to jump shoot, it's actually required to jump shoot to actually get past this section. And with this section as well, they need to learn how to jump shoot. And as you can see, the areas get longer as the game progresses. So the movement section was actually the shortest, and now this section, being the last one before the boss, is the longest section in total. And it's also quite a bit harder than anything that the character has experienced before. However, if they can make it past this level, then they would be well prepared, rather, to fight the end level boss. And the video just glitched out there for a moment, but as you can see, the player made it through and is now having to do kind of the final test of the level, where they actually have to use everything that they've learned, jumping with hazards, and as well as jumping with falling blocks to defeat the enemies to move on. This is kind of a test for the fighting airborne enemies, as this is the hardest airborne enemy section thus far. You can see the player had a little bit of a challenge defeating that particular enemy. And now that the player has moved on from the 6th section, now we move on to the final section, which is the boss fight, which puts all mechanics learned thus far into play in order to beat the boss. Now you can see here he's learning how to jump and shoot at the same time to avoid his shots, as well as jumping over those falling blocks and hazards to prevent himself from the instant death. As well as, of course, shooting and learning how to encounter enemies. And that's my level. So thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. And thank you.